My name is Megan Ramsey, and I'm the collections manager at the Emily Dickinson Museum.
I'm Kaitlin McGrath. I'm the collections assistant at the Emily Dickinson Museum.
So my role in the cataloging project is to manage each process of the project. Everything from the actual catalog in the Past Perfect collections management database to all the standards of photography, how we rehouse things, and making sure that the project moves along on time.
So I am helping to catalog the whole collection, so going through every object, and then I also photograph each object and edit the images at the end.
I've worked in museums for over 11 years at museums all across the country. I've always worked in collections. I just think that's the most fun position, especially in a historic site where you're really feeling the embodiment of history in the space. And this project has been really fascinating because it's really never been done before. This is the first time that we're looking at this collection in a comprehensive way, so it's super exciting.
I've always had an interest in museums and museum collections specifically. So I've gotten my degree in museum studies, and I've worked part-time and as an intern at several museums in collections.
I've worked at the Bishop Museum in Honolulu, as well as Iolani Palace, which is also in Honolulu. I've worked at the Virginia Holocaust Museum in Richmond, Virginia, Greenbrier Historical Society in Lewisburg, West Virginia, and the Pearl Buck Birthplace in Hillsborough, West Virginia.
Worked at Fort Ticonderoga in upstate New York, Hart Mountain out in Wyoming, and university libraries, both at Western Michigan University and University of Kansas. And then I've also worked at a small local history museum in Trenton, Michigan, doing pretty much the same exact project, cataloging the collection there. So I found that has been very helpful to take those skills into this position.
My favorite part of my job at the Emily Dickinson Museum is the sense of discovery every day. Since this is basically an untouched collection, every time we open a box, we're not really sure what's going to be in it. And sometimes it's fascinating and exciting, and sometimes it's a bit of a dud, so you're always on your toes.
So my favorite part of my job is just the variety of what I get to do. Not knowing what's in each box that we're going to catalog that day, down to like photography and learning Photoshop. Those have been very rewarding experiences.
Welcome to the collection storage warehouse. This is where we store the majority of the collections of the Emily Dickinson Museum. You can see lots of boxes of objects. We have some flat files, and lots of furniture is stored here. This is also the space where we actually do the cataloging project. We have a large open space for workstations and also a photography studio. We'll take you into kind of a day-to-day look at what it's like to do this cataloging work. Usually we will take out a box and lay everything out and see what we have in a box. Today we have some ceramics out. Mm-hmm. And every single object in the collection will get an individual catalog number, so we can track that one specific object versus another object. That number would then be adhered to that object or written on a tag so that it's joined with its record that we're going to create in the database. Everything gets its own name as well. There's a specific nomenclature that we use so that we don't have to figure out what this object is. There's actually a list of known terms, like a teacup. We don't have to think of what that is. There's already a list. Everything would get a description, so that's kind of a general description of what the object is visually, the size, the shape, the color.
Yeah, so for instance, this teacup, I would describe this as a large ceramic teacup that has a white base color and blue coloring. And then I would go into more detail about the actual pattern and the shape of the handle and other features of the physical object.
The next thing we record is the material type. So this piece here is ceramic, but we have other objects that are made of wood, glass, We have fabrics and textiles. We have metals. So all of that material type, all those material types get recorded so that we know what's going on with an object.
The next thing we would be doing is taking dimensions of the object. So we use our measuring tape and just kind of get the overall shape and dimensions of the object so we know how much space it takes up in our storage.
We also record the condition of the object, so if there's anything maybe broken on it, if it's stained, if there's anything that's like drastically kind of wrong with the object, or if it shows any type of wear, we try to record that. We are just doing kind of a brief overview. That's a whole other project of condition reporting each of the objects in depth, but right now we're just trying to get a sense of how stable the object is at this point. So we record information found with the object and any information we may find on the box. So with this particular object, there's a nice label on the outside, and there's a note that says loaned to Homestead from Evergreens 2001, and that's a loan from the group running the Evergreens to the group that was running the Homestead in 2001, since the museum was not formally created until 2003. So this does not mean that it's not a Dickinson piece, it just was at the Evergreens in 2001 and was moved over to be on display in the Homestead at that time. So with this cataloging project, we are recording everything in the Past Perfect collections management software, which is a pretty standard collections management software that a lot of museums use. And it has lots of different fields that we can fill out. In this specific project, we are pretty limited in our time, so we're only recording certain information, but it's a very comprehensive database and it allows us to attach pictures as well, which will be really helpful.
So the last step in our cataloging project is photography, and we're photographing every object that we catalog and attaching those images to its catalog record. So each object we photograph from multiple angles. We have it on a neutral gray background or white background, depending on what the object is. And then we also include the color card for editing and color correction, and the number of the object, so that way it's connected to that object when we're editing, so we don't mix up objects along the way. So right now I'm using a Nikon D750 digital camera, and I'm using it with a 24mm lens. We also have a 60mm lens depending on the needs of the image. So we have flash lighting also to help get the best light for our object. And at the end of this, every image will also be edited through Photoshop.
So one of our coolest objects is a daguerreotype of Susan Dickinson, which is pretty special. So this is a pretty complicated piece because of all of the different material types that it's made out of. The daguerreotype itself is on metal, and it's in this lovely little box, which possibly is made out of wood, and then there's also this fabric here. So everything is going to be degrading at different times and in different ways, so tracking the condition of this object is going to be really important. The most important thing when it comes to object storage is the environment, making sure that the temperature and the humidity are staying very stable and that there's not huge fluctuations, because humidity can bring about mold, and woods can expand and contract in different ways, so it's important that we keep track of the environment here in the space. There is quite a few photographs in the museum's collection. This is our only original daguerreotype. We have a couple of copies of other daguerreotypes, including Emily Dickinson's. But some of the photographs that we have, most of the photographs that we have, are actually from Martha Dickinson Bianchi's era. We have a lot of photography of the Evergreens when she lived there in the 20s and 30s, and actually a lot of photographs of her travels in Europe as well.
Right, so we also have a big collection of the family silver. So this is both Emily Dickinson's family and then the family next door, Austin and Sue. So right here we have a monogrammed fork with ED on the back of the handle, interestingly. And this would have been Emily Norcross Dickinson, so Emily Dickinson's mother's set of silver. So this would have been used at the family home. And it's a very interesting design. It's in really good condition. And it's interesting to see that it's on the back of the handle, and the front is pretty plain comparatively. So we have that. And then we also have on all of our silver that we've cataloged the collections number adhered to it with acryloid B72, which is a safe adhesive process where we print out the number, adhere it, and it's completely reversible. So if we ever need to take it off, we can do that safely. And then the next object we have is a ladle, and this one has Susan Dickinson's maiden initials on it. So that's Susan Huntington Gilbert. And this would have been the set of silver she had when she married Austin. So this is what she would have brought to the marriage, I guess. All right, and then this last piece is a baptismal cup that belonged to Ned Dickinson. So Ned was Emily's nephew and the oldest son of Austin and Sue. So it has an inscription on the front that reads, Edward Dickinson from his grandfather. So that would be Edward, the grandfather would be Edward Dickinson, Emily's father, who Ned was named after. So, all right. This is a very ornate cup, and it's meant to be decorative. So it has a really nice floral design on it, very nice handle, and it's really held up over the years. So when you work with silver, it's important to wear gloves, so that way you don't make any markings on the actual silver itself. Make sure it's a clean work surface. And then when you store the silver, it's important to wrap it in tissue or in silver cloth to help keep it from tarnishing.
We were working in the evergreens, cataloging in the back pantry, and we came across this leather briefcase, which, as you can see, is a little rough condition here. And I'm wearing gloves because working with leather, it's very brittle and it requires a little extra sensitivity. So this briefcase is actually Edward Dickinson's, and there's a nameplate on the top here in between the handles. And it says EDW for Edward Dickinson, Amherst, Mass. So Edward Dickinson was a prominent lawyer and politician, and he died in 1874. So we know at least that this predated 1874. And it may have accompanied him down to Washington, D.C. when he served in Congress, or to Boston when he was in the State House. And it's amazing to think about where Edward may have taken this briefcase and the types of documents he may have transported in this briefcase. This was a pretty important piece to record the condition of. As you can see, it's very well used. There's some holes in the fabric here. On this side, it's very discolored. So we had a pretty detailed condition report on this piece, especially because of its importance being directly related to Edward. So in the future, we will want to actually talk with a conservator who can help us to care for this a little bit more, maybe try to clean up some of the leather and whatever we can do to protect it for the future. So we've cataloged over 7,000 objects so far during this project over the last 2 years. And we started with works on paper, so that's types of artwork or prints and photographs. Then we worked into personal gear and household accessories. Then we worked on food service and food preparation types of items, and we just finished up working on furniture. So the last step of this project will be to work on textiles, and we have roughly 80 boxes of textiles to go through. But out of the 7,000 objects we've cataloged, we have 183 boxes that we've gone through. So we've done a lot of work, but we still have a lot to go. So at the end of the cataloging project, we plan to publish the database online on our website so that the public can actually browse our collection with all of the images we've taken, the descriptions, so that they can start learning about what we have in the collection. And after the end of the cataloging project, we will be working on the next big project, which there's a lot lined up. We will need to do research on the objects, and more rehousing will need to be done, and we're hoping to expand interpretation by getting more objects out on display at the museum.